Hello and welcome to another edition of Simply Free Little Talk. Today is Galveston featured, and I have a long time resident of Galveston, but Galveston County, and has served outside of his county, extensive traveling as a law enforcement agent for 40 years. He's a veteran in law enforcement, and he has had an amazing, impeccable career in law enforcement, but he's also rooted, I call it a rooted historian of Galveston. So he knows a lot about Galveston. It's really amazing that Mr. Eugene Lewis can recall all that he can share with you when you're speaking with him. Without further ado, let me welcome to Galveston featured Mr. Eugene Lewis. Hello, Mr. Eugene. How are you doing?
I'm great. Glad to be with you.
Yes. It is my pleasure to have you here because I've always admired what I've seen from you in your career over the 40 years of your career. Wow.
Been a
40 years
while.
of enforcement. You've seen a lot, you've traveled, you've met dignitaries and celebrities over your career, but you had humble beginnings, didn't you?
I did. I did. I'm a BOI and raised on the west end of the island. I say west end, 55th Street area.
Yeah.
And, I grew up in those oyster shell alleys.
Okay. And for those that do not know, you're tuning in from other areas outside of Galveston, Texas. When we say BOI, that means you're born on the island because Galveston is surrounded by water. So, Mr. Eugene, share with us where did you start your career? It wasn't in law enforcement, your working career.
Well, I always tell younger people I started working at the age of 8. And
Wow.
in the neighborhood, there was a liquor store called Fletcher's, and it was run by a guy we called Big Dre. And he
Okay.
would let me come in after school and restock the shelves. And this is at a time when it wasn't illegal for kids to be in liquor stores.
Yes.
So started there, worked at the local car wash, went from that to bussing tables at a restaurant called Tuffy's. I went
Okay.
from that to working at the Bishop's Palace and Sacred Heart Church here in Galveston.
Wow.
And in my high school years, I had a chance to get in a program called Health Occupation. And it allowed me to explore, health jobs. My father was a respiratory therapist, and so he pushing me in that direction. And I worked for Dr. Sam Nissenblatt, the local optometrist here. And so, things just kind of evolved and happened. But one night watching a TV show called Adam 12, which was a
Adam
cop
12.
show. And they had an episode that talked about law enforcement exploring. And I said, wow. And what I did was call the Galveston Police Department to see if they had a program. And they did.
And they
And,
did.
and the rest is history.
The rest is history. So a TV show, Adam 12, which for those who may not know, was one of the popular TV shows that we all would watch, and it was a police show, and that
Right.
intrigued you.
Yes.
Joseph Day, thank you. He said he loves this. Yes, and we're just going to learn a little bit about Galveston history, but more importantly, the wonderful career and lifetime of Mr. Eugene Lewis, who is here today. So thank you for tuning in, like and share. But Mr. Eugene, you picked up from being a teen police officer, the Explorers, correct? What was the
Uh,
name of that teen organization?
Galveston called it the Junior Police Program,
Junior
but
Police.
officially it was the Boy Scouts of America Law Enforcement Explorer Program.
Good. So it was the Explorers. Good. So share how the island has changed. Kind of go back and tell us the history of like the different, because I just love you sharing history and bringing us an awareness that kind of been lost, like Down Beach and different businesses that was here in Galveston when you were growing up?
One of the blessings of being born in Galveston was that there was a lot to do. And I had an opportunity to spend a lot of time with my elders, my
Yes.
grandparents, my great aunts and uncles. And as a result of that, I watched and learned. And they fed me well in terms of what they exposed me to in terms of the church, in terms of
Yes.
politics, in terms of civic activity, engagement, those types of things, because they were involved in those kinds of things. And so, in watching the island evolve, Galveston has gone through several phases. I grew up a child of the 60s, and so entering public school, in first grade, that was pretty much the beginning of the integration of our school system here.
Mm.
Like choosing to go to Alamo versus going to LA Martin, because Alamo was only 2 blocks from the house. So I've seen Galveston grow. I've seen it expand. I've seen it change. And at the same time, I've always been observant of what I see and where things were and what's changing.
Yeah.
And as a result of my job, I was able to get into places a lot of people couldn't get into. And so that helped me recognize that there were things going on this island. There were people in charge. There were people who were things happening. So from there, I just learned to pay attention. And as a result, I pick up on what's going on, the history of the island, what's changed, what was located where, when it disappeared. And
So you have a lot of fond memories of, like you said, the island has gone through many changes and things. You mentioned segregation. So in some of the schools that certain people could attend because of where they were located in Galveston, or just what was happening at that time.
Well, even though we like to talk in glowing review about Galveston in the good old days, but Galveston is located in the South. And perhaps one of the difference makers for this is because it was heavily involved in commerce. It was a seaport, a deep water seaport. It was a cotton exporter. Cotton was brought in from other places, and they all shipped out of Galveston. And so as a result of that, when cotton was king, there were a lot of jobs here.
Yes.
And, my mother, my grandmother, they all did domestic work. And so I would hear those stories about what's going on the other side of town, in Atlas Circle and places like that where they worked. My mom worked for Jack Tar Hotel at one time.
Oh yeah, famous hotel here.
Yes. So it helped me shape a respect for people, no matter what their station in life was, to appreciate them and honor them, respect them.
So that kind of developed you into this historian. So now you kind of can share with us like the evolvement process and what you've seen change, and even in law enforcement.
So one of the things unique, I got into law enforcement in 1975. I was 18 years old when I went through the academy. I hit the age 19. And back then, I guess a lot of the assignments were based on racial makeup of the community. And quite often, I spent time working in what we call District 2. It's basically 21st to 35th, and occasionally extended to 53rd Street. On the north side of Broadway were a lot of the public housing complexes. A lot of the nightlife was north of Broadway. So being in and out of different places, different businesses, can recall, there were a lot of nightclubs. There were a lot of places to go to eat. There were a lot of churches, in fact, And so you get to know the people who are behind the scenes.
Wow. So basically Galveston was known as the what was it, the Vegas of the South?
It could have been known as that. On the stationery, it says the port and playground
It was
of the Gulf. But the reality, it was also Sin City.
It was Sin
Uh,
City here. Yes, yes. A lot happened.
because it was an active port, so you had the sex trade business alive and well here when I came on the department.
Wow. And that's a lot that we don't talk about. We don't talk about the rich history that's here in the evolving of the city. But you, as a law enforcement agent for 40 years, let's say that 40 years, guys, he has served us in the community. What was that like? Because there's a picture I saw of you as a young man, and there were youth all around you. What did that feel like? What was the response of young kids when they saw you?
I'm always mindful of the fact that people are always watching what you do and how you do it.
Hmm.
And even at this age, I still run into people who remember when I was on the streets. And
Wow.
sometimes people remember stuff I forgot. In reality, it was a different experience. There
Hmm.
were only 18 African American police officers on the department at that time. In my academy class, I was the only African American. And so there were things you go through that other people didn't go through and wouldn't
Yes.
understand. And so
Mm.
I'm well aware of that. But
Yeah.
I had some mentors. I had people, in the department who were helping to guide me. One of my training officers was John Irving.
Okay. I
One
remember his name.
was Leon Lewis, a captain in the police department. But
Yeah.
also the guys who helped me through the Virginia police program were people like Raymond Rubio, Bill May, uh, another guy, I can't think of his name right off the top of my head, but there were a lot of folks who came and rallied around to help me get through the process.
Yes.
So, you know, and what I like about that is that, it wasn't just African American officers, it was white officers
Yes.
also, because they got to know us in that junior police program.
I love that. I love that you said that the unity. So the camaraderie was very positive. You guys worked together.
We did, we did. There were things that may have happened to make you, scratch your head, but for the most part, you had to be a cohesive group.
Yes.
Galveston was a very busy town because we had activity coming at us from pretty much around the world. Ships would come into
Definitely.
port, and then you had the tourists who would come in, and so you had to be uh, a team that worked together. The, the law enforcement has changed over the years. And when
Hmm.
we see it's not what we saw back then. And we didn't bring to the streets the firepower that officers have today.
Yeah.
We had very calculated in what we did, how we did it. And the other issue was we lived in the communities which we served. Uh, that was the rule. We worked in the city, we lived in the city. And so by the result of that, you got to know the people who lived in the city. One of the other things that helped us, be a more temperate agency, if we wanted a pay raise, we had to get the citizens to vote on a referendum. So you had to
Wow.
go and have people support the blue. They support you by going to the ballot box and voting yes or no.
Wow. That's changed a lot. So the citizens of Galveston really had a say in your pay and how things were flowing here in the Galveston.
Well, they had to say it in giving us those little incremental bump ups.
Yeah.
Uh, Almost laughable when I think back about what we were paid, back in the 70s to do the job that we did. But you had to have a passion for the job. Without that, you couldn't do it. But in, in, in interacting with the community, you got to know folks who walked on both sides of the street. Uh, they stand up, upright citizens, and then there were those on the other side who had some checkered issues that they were involved in. And you knew who they were, and you were able to manage, work with those communities all across the island.
Mm. Share some of the opportunities that you were afforded as a result of being in law enforcement and being a representative, where it lands you in the governors, in the capital, and then other states that you end up? How did that evolve to?
One of the things, being a young African American, they were quick to want to push me out in front of an audience and say, you know, come work with us. Uh, I was president of the Texas Peace Officers Association, the Galveston branch, for a number of years, and that was the catalyst for working in the community. Initially, in 1935, when that organization was founded, it was founded at the Texas Negro Peace Officers Association.
Okay.
And it evolved. We dropped the Negro and it became the Texas Peace Officers Association. And after a few years, I became their state president. And so working through them and working with other national and statewide organizations, uh, it allowed me to be introduced to people who were movers and shakers.
Yes.
So even right here in Galveston, the T.D. Armstrongs, the Thomas Green, uh, the Dr. Stanton, uh, those folks, prominent educators, Dr. Morgan. Uh,
Hmm.
there was so many people they were entrepreneurs in their own right. They were making things happen, and they had the resources to get it done. So I often talk about Mr. Green. When I started a little company called Island Star Production, Mr. Green was behind the scenes when I needed finances to do something. He would put it up, and I would quickly repay him. But he did those kinds of things people didn't know about. So when it came to sponsoring a show, I had TV King coming to town. Uh, TV King wanted his money up front, no check. He wanted cash. So you couldn't get him on the stage until he was paid. And so sometimes the ticket sales didn't go where they needed to go, but Mr. Green would make it happen. I recall we went to the Capitol. Mr. Green rented the bus. We took the whole delegation to Austin, Texas. We met with Governor Mark White.
Yes.
Talked about the issues that were facing our. So I think I kind of got steered in the direction of being a civil rights advocate. Working with Reverend James Thomas, you had
Yes.
to do things. So
Yes.
in doing so, I got a chance to meet a lot of politicians.
Hmm.
They're very thankful, very well known. Right after that, we were talking right here. We were assigned to Texas detail, dealing with him the entire time. We with the Alps, people like Julian Bond, Harold Washington, Henry
Yes.
Jackson, all these folks, especially Jesse Jackson,
Hmm.
came on the app. So there
Wow.
were a lot of opportunities to meet people and work with people, working with the state NAACP to do some things. Adam Johnson, who was the first elected countywide commissioner of Galveston. I say could be county commissioner, too. But he was very forward thinking and very much a thinker. So if you spend time with him,
Oh yeah.
he would always, Wayne saying, he'd call you at 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the morning, and have you seen the paper yet? Wayne, still asleep. Get the paper. And so I got in the habit, I'd be out my driveway 3 o'clock in the morning waiting for the paper to come. But you stayed on top of the current events and what was
Yes.
happening. You knew what you needed to know.
So you really
So
had some great mentors then.
great mentor. You know,
Yeah.
they 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 saw something in me that at that time I hadn't saw in myself.
That's good.
T-
That's good.
TJ Ziggy, for example, not only did it own a local nightclub, he also owned a barbershop. We had a little community event. We had a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
But we would often have conversations because in my district was for all of his students. So one time he said, "There's some people you need." He gave me a list of folks. And we hosted at my house a greet with all these folks who were invited. They actually showed up.
And they actually showed up. So when
They
someone
came.
wants, oh, go ahead.
Now I was gonna say they actually came to my little humble, house.
Your humble house, and they
And,
showed up. So
and,
let me ask you, when there was something that the people needed to do, they often came together and things were more organized, you would say, unified, because you mentioned that a lot with um, people just came together to make things happen. You mentioned Juneteenth. I just want to kind of get you to elaborate on what Juneteenth means here in Galveston and how we began to be active here in Galveston.
well, first let me say this about the unity that I observed. The churches were at
Yes,
the core of everything that went on in this community.
that's right.
You had a powerful group of Black ministers who stood together on a lot of
That's
issues,
it.
and
I
they lived
recall.
in the land. That was essential. Also. But you know, I don't know where we kind of fell off the wagon, but at one point on Sunday, you would find almost everybody in church. I didn't care who you were,
That's
you
right.
went to church. And we had large congregations.
Very large.
Now, uh, people have changed. And I often say, well, Kmart came out with the blue light special on Sundays,
Yeah.
and other businesses started following. And they say, well, the religious exemption and all that. But you know the reality of that. People had to work at things. It wasn't just about those who were your first responders and public, the hospitals and things of that nature. And we saw a significant change in who was in church and who was on the golf course and who was on the beach and things
Sure.
like that. So our attitudes changed. But in the late 70s, right into the early 80s, we started working on revitalizing Juneteenth, or the celebration of emancipation of slaves here in Texas. I hate to say it, but prior to that, I didn't really know anything about Juneteenth.
Mm. And it
I learned
originated right here in Galveston, though, right?
everything else. Didn't have a clue. That's not something that's taught in our schools. Uh, they don't talk about those kinds of things. And so when it came up, Reverend Thomas, it was his ideal to make this happen. Uh, he invited me to come on board because I had worked with him on his protective detail after they burned a couple of crosses in his yard at his church.
That's true. Recall that.
I started working with him. Through that, I met Al Edwards. Uh, Al was very instrumental in taking the bill to the state, making it become a state holiday. But all along the process, I would travel with Reverend Thomas to Austin. Sometimes Mrs. Emily Charles would travel with us.
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Delva May, I can't think of her last name, but she would go also.
Yeah.
Delva May, and we'd go sit in on some of those committees. We give testimony in some of those committees to make that happen. So, in meeting those folks, we had a chance to meet the state president of the Texas NAACP, Gary Bledsoe, and work with him on a lot of things. But in doing that, that meant traveling around the state. And there were times, Point Bay, Dallas, Austin. We went down to Orange, Texas. President Clinton
Mm-hmm.
had an executive order integrating public housing in Viter. Uh, we were at Lamar University when there was a TV talk show. They were doing things there, and the plan showed up. So they're just those types of experiences that I've had. Being responsible for security, Jesse Jackson, before he got a Secret Service detail assignment. So Texas peace officers helped provide security for him. When he came to Galveston, we were there. So a lot of times you'll see pictures. He's here in Galveston. I'm standing either a hand reach from him,
Yeah.
behind him, at his side, and always looking to see what else is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the kinds of experiences that I was blessed to have.
Yes.
Uh,
And that's
so
good.
I tell the story, how did I get into public speaking? If you go to conferences sometimes, you can get some very boring speakers in front of you. And I said, well, I think I could do that.
You
And then
said you can do that.
I worked midnight. So I was channel surfing one night, and Les Brown was on TV.
Mm-hmm.
And he had this videotape called You Deserve. And I listened to what he said in that video about how he got started. That next morning, I was on the telephone calling Channel 8. How did I get this video? Where did I get this video? And I
Mm.
got it. And the school board president at the time, Neil Nathan, who owns a local insurance agency in Galveston, invited me to speak to a regional group of school board members from Region 4. So that's about 54 school districts in representation. And I talked about evolving school security from where it was to where it needed to be.
Yes.
And talked about emergency response, because at the time the only thing school districts had in place was fire drills. And I said, coming from the city of Galveston, we had hurricane drills, we had all the kinds of things that first responders had to respond to. And so my driving theme was, well, what are you going to do until the police get there? And it's giving that presentation in Houston of Region 4, there was an assistant U.S. attorney in the audience. After, we exchanged information, a week went by, and I get an invitation to go to Atlanta, Georgia.
Wow.
That started my career, basically as a public speaker. Secondly, as a consultant on school crisis and emergency.
Wow. And you're still teaching and giving consultant advice to educational systems as well, and safety, correct?
I am still doing that, not as much as I used to after I retired. And COVID really
Yeah.
kind of put a stop to a lot of that. That in-face, face-to-face meetings and conferences. So I haven't done anything here recently. Unfortunately, the Uvalde situation
Mm-hmm.
has fallen into it.
Yeah. Very tragic situation.
We're trying to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Absolutely.
One of the things that unfortunately happened in Galveston my first year, school district, there was a young man named Derek Brown who was stabbed to death at one of our middle schools. And as a result of that, this was pretty much in carte blanche to do what I needed to do to make sure that didn't happen. So my drive mandate is to make sure we maintain schools that are safe for kids to learn, teach, and speak. So we said about the
So that's good. So you actually put some policies and some guidelines in place to prevent situations like that. Did you
we,
write
we,
school system, correct?
we wrote emergency response plans for Galveston and other districts throughout the state. In addition, I went to work for the Texas School Safety Center to help them establish their training program. And whereas most people looked at them as being looked at school districts in a different light from other agencies, and so we had to stand up and be professional. And that was
Yeah.
the effort. You're not security, you're police officers, you're professional. My
That's good.
superintendent at the time, the superintendent who hired me was Jen Pickett. And one of the things Mr. Pickett wanted was a softer uh, uh, approach other than standard law enforcement. And so he sent me to Washington, D.C. to interact with the National Association of School Security Directors. I was a little reluctant, but he insisted. And since I'd never been to Washington, D.C., I said, well, keep the trip.
I'll take
And
it.
a funny thing happened after I got to D.C. It didn't change me. I changed it. And what we went from
It's
being a
good.
National Association of School Security Directors to being the National Association of School Safety and Law Enforcement Officers, and
Wow.
bringing in only security uh, units, but also bringing in those police officers who are working in our schools, and not calling in the SROs, because the SROs, school resource officer, works for another agency.
Ah,
But we use school-based police officers who actually work with school districts. At that time, the only states that allowed that was Texas, Florida, Nevada, and California. The others had to contract basically with outside agencies to provide law enforcement in the school. So we quickly changed that, and now that's becoming more or less a standard across the country.
that's awesome. Wow. Our place in society is purpose. Yours was to go and connect with that organization, like you said, change it and make things better for our school systems regarding safety. So, with that being said, I wanted you to share with us some safety advice, some security advice from a police standpoint, and how we should conduct ourselves as citizens when we're interacting with law enforcement.
Well, one of the things that you have to do as a citizen, the average police contact happens at a traffic stop. And whether you believe you did something, you didn't do something, uh, you need to be appropriate in your conduct. Uh, the situation is already elevated.
Mhm.
The environment, people are leery of the police are leery of people. Uh, that doesn't make for a good mix. Uh, if you go off, I say go off, you're cursing, you're doing all the things that you do. And I say the same thing to police officers. You can't jump out and use the explicitives and all the things that you do to further uh, heighten what's going on in the streets. We have to be mindful of that. I can't remember back in the day uh, being disrespectful to people. You walk up to the car,
Yes.
you introduce yourself, or if you're stopping the car, things that way. Uh, in all my years on the streets in Dallas, I don't recall that maybe a
Wow.
handful of people, maybe five at the most, who you had to physically get rid of. And
Hmm.
most you dealt with people, you respected them, they respected you.
Yeah.
Uh, Citizens back then, though, if you didn't, uh, we were going to bring it to you.
Okay.
And that was an understanding on both sides.
Yes.
And so when you're answering calls, and one of the things about Galveston, we rode mostly single man units. And so
Wow.
you couldn't afford to get out there and get something started when it's only you.
That's true. So the respect that you guys had, y'all were very connected when you were on the force of going into the school systems, talking to the youth, and just even the community. You knew your community you worked in.
So one of the things I did, I had the opportunity to teach in the Galveston Police Department Academy. And I introduced a program called Minority Relations. And in the Minority Relations program, every academy cadet had to come through and sit for X number of hours. One of the things I did at Ball High School is I brought in those academy cadets to the civics class and have them take questions from the kids. But more importantly, I wanted the kids to tell them how they felt about the police. And that was a very interesting exchange. Uh, Mr. Clary was one of the people there at Ball High School that helped facilitate that. But
Right.
we'd have an entire academy class go over there and meet with those kids. And so I think that was good for them. It was good for the officers. Uh, Some of the officers that were in our academies didn't grow up in Galveston. They didn't know the unique dynamics of Galveston, Texas. In the minority relations class, we had it wasn't about a black and white thing, it wasn't about a brown and white thing, but it was all the unique communities of the island. We had a rather large, Jewish population. We had a rather large Italian
Absolutely.
here. And so having them get to know those communities and how things in Galveston we interacted. Galveston is really a cosmopolitan type of place.
Yes.
It was not just like a lot of other communities. You didn't, when I was growing up, you didn't have a track that separated one neighborhood from another neighborhood.
That's right.
We talk a lot about North Broadway,
Mhm.
east of 25th Street, so 25th to 46th Street. That was predominantly a minority community, people of color, Hispanic community,
Yes.
African community. But beyond that, we have people sprinkled all across the island. Because this was a very diverse, because it was a very labor-intense community, people needed to work. And we often talk about back in those days, close to 10% of the population lived in public housing. And the answer is why? Because Galveston needed manual labor. Cotton complexes, the shipping industry. We didn't have a lot of mechanized loading of ships. Most of this was done by guys getting there, grabbing, those bales and what have you, and moving them physically. Now we see containers coming in, they're lifted with cranes, they put on trucks, and they're driven off. That was not the case. So we had jobs at the waterfront. We had a booming medical center. We had a
Wow.
lot of there. We had a booming tourist industry. We had a lot of jobs there. So you had, people behind the scene. They were cooks. They were the maintenance people. All those jobs were plentiful. So we had a good representation of people throughout Galveston who were working and making.
Hmm. So it was a working community, and we had opportunity. Like Lipton Tea was here. You mentioned UTMB. What other companies were right here in Galveston where people can go and get a job? It was just plentiful to have employment.
You know, off the top of my head, I'll be struggling to call the companies who are here, but they needed people. Yes, there are a lot of those companies that were here, and they had their glass ceilings. I'm not gonna lie about that. Even in the police, they had a glass ceiling,
Yeah.
and some people were able to get through, others were held back. And I don't make words when I talk about those things.
Hmm.
It's a part of the story.
It's a
And
part of the
so
story.
you have to be able to tell the whole story, not
Got
have
to
one
tell the
part.
whole story. That's right. So share
So
with us how important Miss Anna Mae Charles was to getting kids to remain in school.
Mrs. Charles was perhaps legendary because she knew the community. She knew not only the kids that she was dealing with, but she knew their parents and most often their grandparents. She was very active in her church and very active in her community. A lot of times we tout her as being the first African American female police officer. That's not necessarily correct because Mrs. Charles was not necessarily a police officer. She worked as a juvenile matron. And so as a result of that, she was out there on patrol with the juvenile officer. And because when she was in the African American community, she could go up and talk
Yes,
to
you could.
kids, talk to parents when nobody else could do that.
That's
And
right.
so she earned respect. She wore a uniform. And the natural assumption was she was a police officer.
Yeah.
She carried a little strap in her purse. And the kids
That she did.
understood. If she told you to get off that corner, get off that corner.
Out of that
She told you
corner.
to go home. And one of the unique things about Galveston was that we had the compresses,
Yeah.
and at 6 o'clock in the afternoon, they blow those horns, blow the
Mhm.
whistle.
I remember
And
hearing them.
as kids, we knew that meant you should have been home.
That
And,
means you
and
should have been home.
yeah, we were a community that also had street lights. So don't let them street lights come on and you're not home. And we all understood that. And
Yeah.
the whole community was involved. There were radio stations. I
Yeah.
remember Case Radio. It's
Yeah.
5 o'clock. You know,
You know.
or they used to do that. It's 10 o'clock. You know where your children are. At five
Yes.
o'clock, you know where your husband is. So those kinds of things. So we were uh, a unified community.
Mhm.
And I'm in the neighborhood I'm in now. I know some of my neighbors. I don't know them all.
Yes.
Come and go. They see me come and go. We may wave. But growing up in Galveston, you knew people,
You
not just
knew.
know their face. You knew their name. You knew
Yes.
where they lived. They knew you. They knew where you lived. And so all the neighborhood businesses, you got to know those folks. They got to know you. They knew your parents. And so it made a difference in growing up. You didn't have the volume of crime that you have now.
No.
The crime was there, but it wasn't like it is today. And I think there's some more respect for each other. There's more dignity. Uh,
Yes, definitely.
and,
Yes, I totally concur with you on that. The respect level, the unification, and just being together and working together, and the James Thomases, and all the other officers that you named. And definitely, we had to give honor to Miss Anna Mae Charles. She's one of my grandmother's friends. I just think about what she did, the power that she had to correct. So I said all that to get to this point. In your experience of working in a school system, do you think that we should implement like another Miss Annie Mae Charles to help the kids to know the importance of staying in school, to take that extra step and care for our youth, to let them know they're loved and appreciated?
one of the things I learned when I went to the schools is that there was a desire to have to phase out what they call the hall monitor.
Mm,
And we began the process of being trained certified police officer. But
yeah,
what I learned in doing there were those individuals that classified as home monitors. They knew the community. They knew the kids.
they
They could
did.
say to the kids that those officers couldn't say. They could quell situations in those classrooms that
Hmm.
couldn't. And so I said, it'd be stupid on my part to do away with that behavior.
Hmm.
But what we did was we upgraded it. We
Yes,
changed the hall monitors to safety officers. We put
it's
them in uniform,
good.
but they still knew the kids.
They had
Uh,
a relationship with knowing the kids.
they had a relationship. This is Lois Collins, for example.
Yes,
She was
yes.
there when she was there. She worked in those schools, and
Hmm.
she started out working as a
Yes.
custodian.
Yeah.
And worked to do a hall monitor. And when I came on board, she became the a safety officer, and I put her in charge of the school crossing guard program.
Yes.
So, there were folks like that who were there, and they were heavily invested into our community. Uh, Aaron Morgan, for example, uh, sung with the gospel. Uh, Help me out. William Church had a choir, men's chorus to
The men's course. Okay, okay, okay.
the gospel. But he was
Yes.
well known, well
Yes.
respected.
Very well known. You correct. You correct. You correct.
And so, people like Gary Simmons,
Yeah.
you know, grew up in Galveston. He was young enough to relate to the kids.
Yes.
And so they made the police department job easy.
Yeah.
And if they had the kind of connections they had with the kids, they could solve cases for the police department that they couldn't solve. Because the kids would come to school and tell them what they knew and who they heard. You know, so it's one of those things that I talk to school districts now. I tell them, you need those folks in your school.
That's
It'll
true.
save you a lot of time. You know, when I gave them whistles, everybody said, "What are you doing whistles?" Because when they blow the whistles, they don't have to say anything to the kids. They know what that whistle
They
means.
already
It's
know.
time to move, time to get to class, time
Yeah.
to break it. And so, you know, sometimes we can have a lot of book sense
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
be missing some common sense.
Miss the basic things.
So that's one of the things that, you know, I still go around. I still have that common sense approach.
Yeah. Common sense approach. That's good. That's good.
On my
Well,
business card is says I'm drawing a blank now. But we talk about that
yes,
uh,
yes. It's just
experience,
unity. You talked about unity.
yeah, experience-based solutions to
Yeah.
school
Experience
security.
based solutions. Now, what I
So
want to share here, let me interject this so everybody will know. You've had some health challenges, but your memory is still amazing with what you dealt with, you know. And I just want people who don't understand, it's not that he's intentionally forgetting things or his age is something. He's had some health challenges, but he has a memory like no other. I tell you, you still can be an amazing counselor that you are. And you're also a minister here, associate minister where I would like you to share that with everyone as well.
I'm currently serving at Jerusalem. I'm sorry, at Gethsemane
Yes, and
Missionary Baptist. Uh, and that's an interesting thing. When I retired from acting, I had a chance to go and speak at a little church here in Alvin called Labor of Love.
mm-hmm.
And I've always known in my heart that there was a call and a tug on me to go into the ministry. But I ran from that calling, and, and, and on that one occasion, I was on my way out of town, and they called me to stay in town. And so 10 years, I labored at the Labor of Love Christian Fellowship Church as an associate pastor there. So I give credit to Dr. Alvin Gills, who was a pastor. And like me, his background was in law enforcement. His wife, they are both retired law enforcement officers from the Houston Police
Wow.
Department. And they were doing youth ministry. They had group homes for kids, for wayward kids.
Wow.
They started
The heart of
church
the king.
to, to show the kids the light.
Yeah.
I was privileged to work with them.
Mm-hmm.
Things that we did there
Yeah.
before uh, COVID. We shut down the church for quite a while.
Yes.
Process of building a new church there.
Okay.
It delayed the progress of getting the church built. I went to the seminary and watched it.
Yes.
My good friend, Tim Sykes, who was also a former Galveston police officer,
It's Pastor
and
Tim Sykes. Yes.
that church, and helping him through some things that he went through there. So I'm still to the church in Galveston, but I'm still, rooted in Alvin as well. And even though I grew up and was baptized in West Point Baptist Church,
Yeah.
the late Reverend J.F. Sargent, so I haven't lost what God planned.
That's
That's one of the
awesome.
things that I'm always mindful of. Sometimes I look back at speeches that I've given over the years, and the reality is they're the same. But I have to learn in such a society, kids are the kids. So when I talked about the Bible, I would say best-selling book in the world. You'll find
Yes,
a
it
chapter
is.
like peace, and it says this: those who are Christians knew what I was talking about.
Yes.
Those who were not, they went over.
Mm.
So there's always a way
It's
to
always a
get
way.
them. So to help young people. Like the school, people are often saying, they took prayer out of the school. No, they didn't. What
It
they
did.
said is the officials can't force a prayer, can't lead a prayer.
Yes.
The kids can. So if prayer was in the home, When you sent that kid to the school, that prayer is still there.
It's
It's
still
just,
there.
are they not ashamed to
Mm,
bow his? So often in the cafeterias, I would watch the faith, see what kids bow to pray before you be
it's
surprised.
awesome.
That's good. So we need to change what we say. It's not about the politics of it.
Absolutely.
Kids to school who are rooted in their faith and not ashamed to pray. They will carry the spirit of
Well, you just corrected the lot that people have. Again, that's based upon you hear what someone says versus you got find out for yourself and get the facts. So I appreciate you bringing all forth what you've learned today. You shared a lot with us about Galveston, the involvement, police department, education, and just the unity of the community. And more importantly, you brought a lot of the history that was established with Juneteenth. And so we appreciate you taking the time to come on the show today just to give us this information that we need. So we need to know a lot more about what is happening in Galveston. So again, thank you for taking the time to come on today.
So thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you, Eugene. We're gonna go ahead and sign you off. Thanks
Okay.
again. Well, there you have it. There's a 40-year veteran law enforcement, someone who is rooted in the community of Galveston, someone who grew up here as well and has a lot of knowledge of things and had the opportunity afforded to him to work with so many amazing individuals like Reverend Thomas. Love that man. He was amazing. He was not a figurehead in anything he did. He actually got in there and he did it. He got it done. So with that being said, I'm signing off of Galveston Feature. If you know someone who really knows the history of Galveston and really want to make a difference in Galveston, then I would love to feature them on Galveston Feature because we have some great richness right here in Galveston, Texas. Thank you from the Simply Free Little Talk. Be blessed.